So, what was it like to actually be in the trenches? Well, let's have a look. Firstly, why were people in the trenches at all? Previous wars, and there'd been lots of them, had been fought without people needing to go into these holes in the ground. But things changed, technology changed, and it meant that there were improvements in the weapons. And unfortunately, improved weapons are just better at killing people. So machine guns were invented that could fire 500 rounds per minute, and it meant that unless you were hidden away, you would simply be killed by the machine gun. So people went into trenches. They look like this. You would be living, you'd be sleeping in the trench. So the men on the ground there are not dead, they are simply sleeping. There's a fire step that you can see on the left-hand side. The man is sleeping on that. Some people are asleep. I think there's a man on the left sleeping in a dugout, so slightly better, like a hole that's been dug into the side of the trench. The man on the right with the rifle, he is on sentry duty. It's his job to make sure that the Germans aren't coming. If he fell asleep, he would be killed by his own men with a firing squad for breaking an important rule. Now, what was the situation like in these trenches? Well, it was pretty abysmal because you would be attacked at various points by artillery, and artillery would essentially, it's one of these. It's a cannon or a large gun, and they would be firing shells if it was at a point in the war where there was a battle going on in that area. Then you would be fired upon by or bombarded by hundreds and thousands of shells, many of them landing very near to you, with a constant risk, of course, that you would be killed by one of these shells. People were obsessed with rats. There were literally millions of rats, large brown rats particularly, that were in the trenches and in no man's land, and they were feeding on the food that the soldiers were throwing out. They were also, more disgustingly, feeding on dead bodies. And as a result, these men and many other men became obsessed with the rats and trying to kill them in all sorts of ways. They did not eat them, although many people seem to think they did from looking at pictures like this. They merely killed them, and that's about it, really. They could breed about 900, or a pair of rats could breed 900 more rats in a year, and so people were obsessed with killing them. Now, there were all sorts of awful conditions that you had to face in the trenches, because of course the trenches are just holes in the ground, and if it rains, the trenches fill with water. They become waterlogged, and certainly early in the war, one of the problems was trench foot. This was caused by soldiers having their feet in this water for hours and hours at a time, and it would lead to a condition like the disgusting one you can see on the right, in which the blood flow or circulation to the toes would stop, and the toes would essentially die, and parts of the feet would die. That's why they've turned black. And if it was left too long, the only way of treating it was to amputate the leg. That is that.